Hey everybody, Quantum here, and I wanted to give you guys some quick updates on the Amethyst Amber Amethyst Hyper Aggro deck that we created. I did play this against people in 4 matches, going 3-1, winning twice, going first against a Sapphire Steel and a Ruby Amethyst, winning going second against an Amber Sapphire aggro, and then I lost going second against a Ruby Sapphire. It just got to the point where they were able to get a big Sisu out early on a shift, and it just wiped my board. No, really hard to recover from that, and I just couldn't finish off the game from there. But in those matches, I did learn some things and made 2 small tweaks to the deck. And I just want to cover that before I cover some simulation. So check the timestamp on the timeline for the matches where we'll cover some of the changes and how the deck plays out. The first thing is I cut the 3-drop Minnie Mouse clone, which is the Tinkerbell, for Pascal. And I cut the Genie for Baloo's. And so I'll cover those in just a second, pull up those cards. But basically the thought process here is the Genie comes down as a 2/4 evasive that quests for 2 and it draws a card. It's good because it's hard to interact with. Your opponent basically needs targeted removal. It has good toughness for an evasive character. But that being said, it doesn't protect your board. And it's actually a bit of a brick because it's a 4-cost uninkable. The blue is at 3 at least. It comes in and it will continue to protect your board similar to what Donald does. And in the Amber Sapphire, which was an aggro deck match, I did not see Donald, and I wish I did, because what ended up happening in that match is we both ended up using our Daisy Ducks to out each other's aggro threats. I was throwing my Daisy into his Piglets and Lilos. He was throwing his Daisies into my Maleficents and Lilos. And it was just a bit of a grind game, and I was stuck on 3 ink because I literally drew 6 uninkables in a row. And this deck, for an aggro deck, doesn't actually play that many uninkables. So I wanted to just be a little bit more consistent with the curve. And I still stand behind using Dolores, and I still stand behind using 4 copies of Goat and 4 copies of the White Rose. I think these cards offer a great amount of value, especially when you move past the really early game into partly into the mid game, in order to give you some staying power on board. That being said, I was able to clutch out the win against that Amber Sapphire, thankfully. The turn before they would have quested for game, and I had little to no interaction left because I had a Gathering Knowledge in my hand, one of the 6 uninkables that I drew in that sequence, and I was able to close out the game with that after I was able to get, I think it was one of my Maleficents to stick in ready state and quest with that, and then finish the game off with the Gathering Knowledge. But if we take a look at what the Pascal replaced here, the Tinkerbell, in the Ruby Sapphire match that I lost, the Tinkerbell was a dead card in my hand, right? I'm like, if I play this out, it's just going to get small Sisu'd away. It's really susceptible to the Sisu shift. It's susceptible to brawl. So I'm investing 3 ink on a high-end curve in order to play a card that's just get instantly outed, right? Whereas the Pascal, it's lower to the ground. It only costs 1. It continues to put a lot of pressure on, and it will likely always have evasive, and it dies to everything the Tinkerbell dies to. In certain matchups, the Tinkerbell is good, but after some testing, it's like whatever the Tinkerbell is good against, like I don't necessarily need the Tinkerbell in those scenarios, so I might as well just cut it, right? Because I have other efficient cards to play. So in hindsight, like the Tinkerbell ended up not being a good option. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know in the comment section below if it didn't. Maybe I can try to explain it a little bit better. And then the Genie. I was really high up on this card, and I do think it's a decent card. But in this particular deck, I just do think that the 4-cost uninkable, same reason why we don't play Rabbit, is just way too much of a liability here. I did end up drawing both of the Genies that I had in the deck in that Amber Sapphire match, and there were dead cards in my hand. Like I couldn't play them because I was stuck on 3 ink, and I just kept drawing uninkables. So that like really hurt me. If I would have got this out on board, on curve, it might have been beneficial because it would have presented the Amber Sapphire player like something that they couldn't interact with, and it's just constantly getting me 2 lore. And it's a card that could actually challenge out some of their stuff with the 2 strength if I needed to claw back some advantage, right, in board state. But in hindsight, again, it just seemed like it doesn't gel with what I'm trying to do with the deck. Because again, even in those aggro mirrors, the blue would make it so that the opponent would not be able to trade out their Daisy Duck into my 1-drops, right? Because the blue was just an extra bodyguard. Like I said, I never saw the Donald, and to be fair, they never saw a Donald either. But the extra bodyguard here, I do think in the end makes sense. And I didn't want to go higher on the uninkable count, so that's why I replaced the Genie for it. But yeah, those are the updates, and that's why I made those changes. So let's go ahead and take a look at the simulations, and I'll try to break down some of the matchups. So as usual, take these replays with a grain of salt because it is a simulation against the computer. I did, for all three of these simulations, try to go up against decks that I think would give aggro trouble. I made it so that I was on the draw for each of them, and I gave the CPU an advantage of drawing 2 cards a turn, which you'll see as the match progresses here. So in this first matchup, I'm going up against an Amber Ruby kind of tempo song deck, which can present a lot of problems for an aggro deck because, first of all, they play nicely on curve, and the bigger threats that they develop means that they're able to consistently run over your aggro threats. And they also have available targeted removal. So there you can see off the Daisy Duck quest, I revealed a big Sisu, and if they play the small Sisus, they're going to be able to easily deal with my board. They also play Brawls, Mauis, etc. So a lot of cards, and Super Goofs potentially. So a lot of cards that really give aggro a lot of trouble. I do think Ruby is aggro's hardest matchup if they build the Ruby decks correctly, just because they have so many ways, but like the rush characters and the strength-based removal to out your cards. But the opponent here didn't have a 1-drop, but they do have a Lilo that they quest with. And again, because I kind of revealed with the Daisy Duck that they're not on an aggro focused strategy with this Amber Ruby deck, I can afford to not bother trying to interact with their Lilo, and instead I can opt to try to build up my board state and just put a lot of pressure on them. So I just quest knowing that I'll likely lose either my Piglet and or my Daisy here. The Daisy reveals a Mulan, so they're just getting all the card advantage and they're drawing 2 a turn, like I said. They quest with the Lilo going to 4, and I anticipate that my Piglet will get taken out by the Sisu, but instead they do indeed drop the Super Goof, which is really bad for me actually. And then there's no sense really in using the Sisu to challenge into the Daisy, since it would only do 3 damage and it wouldn't take it out, so they quest with the Sisu instead. You could argue in this scenario that they should have used the Lilo plus the Sisu in order to take out the Daisy Duck instead of getting the extra, I guess in this case, 4 lore. But in the end, it's not going to matter too much, I don't think. So we quest with the Daisies, we give them yet another big Sisu, and then they trigger off a song, Lost in the Woods, at the bottom of the deck there. And then we're going to just be able to continue to quest out going to 15. So if they took out the Daisy, they would be on 4 lore, I would be on 13. But again, you see here that it actually wouldn't make a difference in the end, just because they didn't see their Brawls and smaller Sisus for the strength-based removal when they needed to see them, despite drawing all those cards. So we're going to be able to cycle protect the Maleficent here with the Fox, and I'm thinking which one's the best to take out. They're still 2 turns away from shifting Sisu, so I said let me go ahead and take out the Goofy here instead, because it likely means that unless they have Maui, which they probably do, at least one of my Daisies should survive, because I only have 1 card in hand, so the Sisu is only on 2 strength. They opt to play the Ariel here, and that gets them a song, which is not going to help them. We're going to win this game very easily, so they just pass back. And then at the end, you'll see what they had in their hands. So despite drawing all those cards, and this is the one thing where aggro can really seem like, I just can't win once we get to this point in the game. Don't feel that way, because they have to show you that they're consistently drawing the ways to out your ready threats. And this opponent had 3 bare necessities, which obviously against aggro is kind of dead, and 3 of the big Sisus in their hand, along with a Mother Gothel for obviously the Rapunzel, and a small Sisu, Emboldened Warrior. So in the end, we ended up taking that one. Okay, so for this next one here, I believe I went up against Sapphire Steel. And I did go up against a Sapphire Steel when I played against an opponent. I went first and I just completely outraced them. I didn't see that they were on Fire the Cannons or Babooms, or if they were, they didn't draw them against me. So in this version that I built, I do play the Babooms. I do think that Baboom is still a decent card going into the meta, but again, we'll see how things develop. The opponent, though, again, drawing 2 cards a turn, going first here, gets a good start with a Popsicle, but then on turn 2, they only are able to develop a second Popsicle, and that's really good for me. So I don't need to play out the Mim Snake in this scenario, because they're not threatening taking out my Maleficent. If they have the action or songs in order to take it out, that's fine. I just don't have to worry about a character coming in and challenging it, because nothing in this ink pairing has Rush. So they eventually do drop the Smee, so they obviously drew that in one of the 2 draws they drew for that turn, I believe. And that is a threat to us. So thankfully we did draw the Donald, but in this scenario, the Donald is a little underwhelming because what the opponent could do here is use the Smee, crash into the Donald, and then protect the Smee from getting the final damage at the end of the turn by using one of their 2 popsicles to heal it, and then the Smee would stay on board. So the Daisy thankfully doesn't hit for them, but again, it doesn't matter because they're drawing 2 a turn anyways. And in this scenario, the Donald will at least buy my board an additional turn, which is good because while again, if they opted to take out the Donald, which they don't, it would make my board susceptible on the following turn. So I would still get another 3 quests in, or for 6, right? Quest with all 3 characters, going up to 15. So you can say that if I don't quest with a Donald here, you know, instead of going to 16, I would really only be at 15, and my board would probably get taken out next turn. But because the opponent, you know, misplayed and quested, I'm going to be able to play the library and then, of course, put the Donald on there. So they have to interact with the Donald first, which means I'm going to draw a card, which is good. And then at least part of my board will survive. You don't really see steel decks on grab your swords anymore, but obviously that would absolutely destroy me if they were on that. But the library will also be gaining me lore every turn. The opponent has a ton of cards in hand. They do indeed take out the Donald, but I will be able to draw now, and we draw into a goat, which is just extra insurance here. They do have a baboom on top of that, so they're cleaning up my board quite nicely. They drop a 3rd Smee, but you can see, right, we're ending the game by like turn 4. They're going to go ahead and crash their final Smee there, and while they did end up cleaning up my board, and then they do correctly use popsicles to heal up their Smees, because, you know, in this scenario you definitely value the characters in order to control a board state more than trying to build up a large ink count for the end game. It's just too little too late. So we're at 17 thanks to the library pushing us up there. Quest with Daisy to 19, and then close the game out with Goat, and let's go on to the final simulation. Alright, so into the final match now. I did opt for the computer to only draw 1 in this matchup because I built an Amethyst Steel mid-range deck, which absolutely should destroy aggro since they still play like Robin Hoods, Let the Storm Rage On, Strength of the Raging Fire, Tinkerbells, things like that. So like basically all the anti-aggro stuff on Steel. And giving them 2 draws a turn is just like, you know, a death sentence basically. But they are going to go first, and we're still on the draw here. So they start with the Trinobog Followers, we start with the Maleficent. We do have to worry, you know, about, again, those songs coming in, but not until turn 3 and after. They get a pretty good curve, though, Trinobog into Smee. And in this scenario, you know, if you were the Amethyst Steel player, you definitely would not want to banish the Trinobog, I don't think, because you value the body on the board that can slow down the aggro player a little bit more over the card draw, unless your hand was, like, really bad and you absolutely needed the card draw. But even then, I would say, you know, you probably still want to keep the Trinobog on board. Anyways, because they have a Smee developed, again, this is how the deck should function. You want to protect your Maleficent, so after questing with it, we're able to bounce it back with the Snake, and then the Snake can take out the Mr. Smee next turn if they opt to quest with it. An odd play in dropping the Library on turn 3, because again, you would normally want to play that when you have the ability to move a character there right away, so that you can get some value off of an exerted character getting banished right away. So because they opt to just raw play out the Library, I'm going to use the Snake to take out the Smee before they have a chance to move it next turn. And then because I have these 3 Maleficents in my hand, I'm just going to play out all 3 on board. Again, coming into the territory of potentially getting Storm Raged and Strength of a Raging Fire, but with no characters on board, the opponent is probably going to value trying to continue to develop a board state. Now the Goat here is a big body that's hard to out. I do have the Fox in hand, which is really important in this scenario, and I make I would say a bad play here in not continuing to quest out with the Maleficents. So I quest with 1 Maleficent, protected by bouncing it back with the Fox, use Fox to crash into the Library, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just do this. Like, in hindsight, I ink and then I replay and I play out the Maleficent as well. So all my Maleficents are still ready, but like, why would I keep it that way? Because they're on 5 ink. They could drop an Elsa to exert one of my Maleficents anyways. They could have Steel Song removal. And the Goat was likely always going to be trying to take out the Mim Fox regardless. So not questing with the other 2 Maleficents was definitely a bad play on my end, because, you know, you can think it through. And like, I mean, I guess it saves me from getting punished on a Fox bounce back. But again, what are they going to do? Quest? Because they opted to challenge with the Goat gets taken out as well, so they have nothing to bounce back with Fox anyways. So yeah, in hindsight, I should have been at 16 and not 12, because as you can see here, the opponent only developed a Goat, so I just lost out on 4 quests, or 4 lore there, right? They do have a Storm Rage. They have a second Storm Rage, so they're going to be able to take out 2 of my Maleficents, but they do exert a Goat in order to do that. and I'm feeling pretty good because I'll be able to go up to 18 now, and I know that they have a goat in hand. I draw a fox per turn, which is actually really clutch here because it does two things. It's going to guarantee that I save a Maleficent here, and it's going to allow me to take out the library as well. Again, the snake only on 3 strength means that it can't take out the daisy directly, and them being only on 6 ink means that they likely can't out both of the daisy ducks. So I think it's the correct play to bounce back a Maleficent and replay it rather than bounce back a daisy, because I don't think they can really challenge into the daisy where it would be able to take out both. And sure enough, they don't have it. So yeah, they're not even able to take out any of my characters, so we just quest for game, and that is the match. Let me know what you think if you made it this far in the video. Thank you again for watching, though. Quantum is out.